What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Questionable Content. It's Curiosity Theory. The boys back at it again. Justin Shaifer, also known as Mr. Fascinate, your friendly neighborhood co-host of Curiosity Theory, joined today, maybe conjoined, some would say, with
Conjoined. We have been described as conjoined many times. Means different things to different people. Dr. Dakotah Tyler, aka Dr. Starkid, astrophysicist, science communicator, just curious individual, professionally curious, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And before we jump into some really cool content that I know I have for you today that we're going to talk about, I think it's pretty interesting. I wanted to give a shout out to some of the Curiosity Theory merch that we got on that we're sporting. If you want to support us, if you're interested in helping us keep this thing going, I mean, you all maybe have saw we started from a scrappy place with no AC. We now have our own studio. We're doing live shows.
Boys was in the alley under a cardboard box, speaking in the tape recorders. Man, really
exactly. And look at us now. We got our own studio going into 2026. This might be one of our last episodes that we record live before 2026. We're about to do live shows. We're about to blow up even more on social media. And look, we appreciate you all support so far. But you can definitely cop the merch, and that'll be a great way to support us. We have mugs, we have hats, we have hoodies,
young,
t-shirts.
black, and rigorous, man.
Yeah.
What your advisor gonna say when you pull up to the meeting with one of these bad boys? He gonna know you for real.
What else? What is there? Other merch? There's stickers. Yeah. We got the stickers. I got the phone
there's
sticker.
Some stickers up there too. My camera's not focusing on it.
I got the phone sticker.
Yeah, we got the little phone stickers. There's hoodies, there's t-shirts.
So yeah, we're also in the process of working with some graphic designers. So if there's anyone listening that's interested, we have some cool projects that we're working on that we love your support with as well. So let's get into the content, man. I think this is really interesting. I think you'll be very intrigued by a couple of these stories. So I don't know if you had heard of Project Genesis before. This is like a recent thing. So the U.S. Department of Energy signed this big collaboration deal with a bunch of big tech companies for this Genesis mission. And this actually just happened relatively recently. I think it was this month. And it's a program aimed at using artificial intelligence to accelerate scientific research and strengthen the U.S. energy and security capabilities. So I guess what they want to do is have all the different companies collaborate together to keep scientific advancements in-house in the United States, which I think is an interesting prospect. I mean, we've kind of talked before about AI tools advancing the frontiers of scientific research. And it seems like this is a situation where more of that is going to happen. And I guess the idea behind it is to rely less on foreign technology, which we kind of know is this big push in this competitive geopolitical landscape.
So this is different than, because I think I'm a little bit more familiar with Project Stargate, which is the like $500 billion investment into data centers specifically for these AI companies.
Correct. So Project Stargate is a completely separate project from Project Genesis. This is more, this is more aimed at, and it's from the Department of Energy as well. And so it's more aimed at frontier scientific research. And like all the different AI companies, or a lot of the ones that are, I guess, a part of this whole thing, are supplying different models and engineering teams and things like that. So it's a really interesting prospect.
And what's also interesting is you can see this tension in how the fear stoked by this current administration, this sort of like isolationist. They want to pull out of every treaty that we have with other countries. They don't want immigrants coming to the country, yada, 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 yada. And it's like the one way that the U.S. has maintained what I'll call in this conversation, like global dominance in sort of technology, STEM, I'll just say STEM, is because we have like funding for science. We have lots of universities, and we recruit top scientists, researchers, folks coming up in academia from other countries. That's like
the H-1B visa. Yeah.
Right. It's like a part of what we're doing. And it does not really fit very well with this ending this attitude of like ending immigration and keeping, trying to keep other people out of the country. And it's like, if you do that, we will lose, other countries will gain on us naturally, right? If there are better opportunities for people in other places where they're more welcome, then that's not. And even as I say this, I guess I'm speaking. It could be perceived that I'm like hoping that the U.S. retains like supremacy in this STEM realm, and maybe on some level that is the case if the future is controlled by whichever companies or countries have the most impressive tech. I would prefer for that to be the one that I lived in, as opposed to other ones. So it's not surprising that they're putting together these programs to try and keep that, because that's like, you could think of it as war, really. You could think of it as like, World War I,
an arms race for sure.
Yeah, an arms race, exactly.
Yeah. And, one of the other things that, they were doing a lot with China over the past year is choking off the supply of the most cutting edge NVIDIA GPUs, the H200 GPUs, which are the underlying technology that powers a lot of the AI tools that we use, like ChatGPT or Claude. And so the really revolutionary thing that happened with DeepSeek was actually a result of them sidestepping using the latest technology and just kind of scrappily figuring out a way to run something competitive without the latest chips. And so I mean, the time that I spent in Asia, man, and I think, at some point maybe we'll do a curiosity theory trip to Asia. Let us know if you're in Asia in the audience. we might be able to set that up. But we want to, technologically, I think we are far behind a lot of parts of Asia. Shanghai, Tokyo, specifically. I've been to Tokyo, spent a lot of time there. I was blown away technologically by what's possible. But also, I think the mentality and education behind engineering and the STEM disciplines in general kind of cultivates a more rigorous, culturally more rigorous, even if you have the same level of baseline talent, that kind of cultural influence, I think, makes for higher achieving STEM professionals. Now, yes, we are funding things now, but it's interesting. It's like, so NSF and like a lot of these other, government programs were defunded in this past year under the Trump administration. And that's directly led to like a lot of things that we do not working the way they usually do. But now you have the Department of Energy creating this initiative where they're leveraging the AI companies to bolster scientific advancement. I think it's an interesting development. But it also seems like it would concentrate power in the hands of very few people. Because, again, it's big tech companies and then it's these government organizations working together. And then there's a lot of people that are historically a part of scientific discoveries that are now left out of the conversation, it would seem.
Yeah. And then I also, those are all great points. It's there's so many moving parts. So it's like there's so much to consider. I also worry about the AI like bubble bursting, whatever that means. It's like,
what do you mean when you say it? What do you mean when you say it? I mean, I know that's a common thing that's lingering in headlines right now. What does a bubble bursting mean to you?
So with my sort of like surface level understanding of economics, the bubble bursting is something that we see historically happen over and over and over and over again. The first example of this, I think, is in like England a few hundred years ago or a couple hundred years ago. There was something called the South Sea Company. And this dude, like England was having a problem with debt. And there was this guy, I forget his name, John Blunt.
John Blunt.
And right. And he basically figured out that if he got people hype about this company, about the promise of what this company could do, then he could like sort of convert debt into more profit. It's like just sort of like a typical scheme, right? Where if people get hype and they continue to buy the stock price increases. And as that continues to happen, as long as more people get more hype about it and like don't want to miss out, then you'll see like this thing continue to grow and people make a lot of money. But because there's
the people that got in first will make a lot of money, but
if as long right, and there's a scale though, right? Because the
mm-hmm.
people who get in today won't necessarily make a lot of money unless the price continues to rise,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, but there's nothing being sold. There's no product, there's no service, right? And
Yeah.
this is like one of the first examples of that. Let me
And
quote the year.
I believe I believe that specifically is called a Ponzi scheme, when there's like no real underlying product or service, and then
Mhm.
the economy kind of fuels this hype, and there's actually nothing underneath it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and so this was this was the 1700s. So this
Mm-hmm.
is one of the first at least noted. I'm sure stuff like this has happened before, but
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
first noted examples of this. And eventually, and so Isaac, this is actually kind of interesting. Isaac Newton invested in this early on, and then pulled his money out after he 10x'd it or whatever, because he was like he just didn't understand it, because it didn't make sense to him. Mind you, Isaac Newton, colloquially at least, we sort of think of him as one of the smarter humans that's ever existed. Anyways, he like mistimed it. It continued to balloon. He put more money in and then lost it at the end when everybody else did. And then here's where I think he has this quote that is he like vowed never to get involved in stocks and that sort of thing again. And this is when he has this quote about I can calculate the motion of the heavenly bodies, but I cannot predict the madness of men.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. And it's him being intertwined in a similar sort
Hype
of
cycle.
a speculative bubble. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
I mean, oh, go ahead.
no, I mean, that's pretty much the story. Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating historical example. I mean, other modern examples that people are probably even more familiar with: the .com boom and bust, right? That was a bubble at a time. The crypto cycle, right, has been referred to as a bubble. A lot of times these bubbles burst because there's more hype in the marketplace and around these technologies than there is practical utility for the technology, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's been like for the .com boom. This is like everyone was buying up .com domains before the internet had the level of utility that it has today. So,
Yeah.
you didn't have social media, you didn't have MySpace, you didn't have Facebook, any of these
Mhm.
kind of things that provide so much access and utility, and the marketplace that was promised 20 years earlier by this boom. And so then that's when you had the bust. With crypto, a lot of times the argument is that it doesn't have a lot of practical use cases. Like most people still don't exchange payments and services in crypto, at least in the US, even though internationally that's a different story.
Mhm.
With AI, I think it's interesting because there is a lot of utility behind the underlying technology, but only for certain companies. Like there's a large percentage of companies that have made substantial investments in AI over the past couple of years now. They haven't really seen a huge return on their investment. Idea is that yet, right? They haven't seen it yet. But for many companies, that may never happen. In which case,
Well,
it
for
does
most,
feel
right, it probably
yeah,
shouldn't, right? That's like the way that it works. There's like a few winners.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting economically because I think it's a concern, but I do think a lot of times, these cycles are kind of a part of, I think, human nature. Like people get in on something early, and then there's hype, and then the hype dies down, and then the builders are still there building, through all of this. And then eventually from the ashes of the bust of a bubble comes this technological progress that we thought was going to come earlier.
Sometimes. Remember, I think a lot of our listeners are probably around our age, like mid 30s, like you and
Well,
I.
early
And
30s for me,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so most people probably remember, especially if they're a little bit older as well, remember the subprime mortgage bubble that burst, like the '08, the housing crisis.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Same sort of thing where it's
I kind
like,
of remember that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, like I was, '08, I was a kid. I was a teenager. So
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
didn't
I feel
have
like, was I even born? I'm trying to remember if I
yeah.
guess I was. Yeah, I know I do remember that though. It did have like a tangible impact on my childhood. Like I remember my
Yeah,
mom had
no,
to work
it's
a
like
bunch of different jobs, and
on
yeah.
for the country as a whole, like it was I guess maybe you would call it a recession. And it's
Yeah.
like these things, these things keep on happening. And I think that what's super interesting, so to jump back slightly to the John Blunt example, and like what he had sort of like, it felt like he struck gold coming up with this thing where he was like, yo, if people are just hype about the prospect of this company being valuable, we can literally get rich off of the imagination of the world, right? And
that's what Jake Paul did too, by the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people do this because it works, and we're not, and people have, and I guess like the big thing that we should all take from history, and why I think it's so important for us to understand these historical lessons, is because people haven't changed. Like we got better technology now. You know, we got podcasts now, and we have cell phones, but we're still the same. Like we're still the same units. We're the same biological animals, and we're still like subject to these same issues. And it's like when that happens, the people who are running these quote schemes, I mean, it's not always schemes. Sometimes they're legitimate businesses, even if they are mostly inflated by hype, and they have to do whatever keeps them alive tomorrow. And that almost certainly, when you get caught in a speculative bubble, it almost certainly is something that can't possibly be sustained. And so it's like, it's going to end at some point, but when is it going to end? And the longer that it goes on, sort of the harder the crash. And so, you know, he would do things, you know, as people were making more and more money, they wanted to diversify. So maybe they would sell some of their stock and start a business over here, this other thing. And that's a problem because right? Because it's like you're sort of
keep feeding the hype.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, well, how do you do that? And then they try to come up with some laws to restrict people's ability to like convert over into other businesses or something. And it's like at any point in time, you have to just do whatever works to keep your company alive tomorrow. And when we see like, you know, the Stargate deal, you see this, even this thing with Gemini, it's like it's called the Gemini Project, right?
No, Genesis. It's called
Genesis. My bad. Genesis. It's like you have to, once the bubble starts inflating, everybody is trying to lock in safety for like tomorrow, next week, next month.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what's fascinating? I recently watched an interview with Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, which many people at this point say the AI market is resting on his shoulders because he is one of those companies that has built a real viable business model underneath it all.
Well, he makes the chips that everybody's computer needs, right?
Correct. So if they start, like basically if NVIDIA has a bad quarter, if they underperform in a quarter, then everyone's like, oh, it's all over. Nobody's buying AI. Nobody cares. The whole bubble bursts, right? So they have to be so on point. He said that for the past few years, I mean, it was a fascinating interview. He talked about how the CEO of Sega saved his company like 20 years ago. Like that's the reason NVIDIA exists, because Sega gave them like money when they didn't even deserve it.
That's pretty cool.
But also he talked about this idea that he is not driven by greed. He doesn't care about making more money. He's just terrified every day. He like vulnerably was like, I'm terrified every day of this all going wrong. I just don't want to mess up. Like I feel like I have this opportunity to, you know, and I just don't want to mess up. And it was very vulnerable. And I was like, dang, that's real. I think everybody's kind of felt that feeling. And even when you think about the
he also may have been lying.
Could have been Kevin.
Psychopath.
That would have been a good PR move, right? Speaking of which,
actually, we're talking about it now. Like, oh, this guy, he's just like us. He's a trillionaire, but man, he's just like you and me, bro.
Speaking of which, though, interesting other thing that I wanted to talk about is related to a PR move that a lot of AI CEOs are making, which is rebranding themselves away from the term AGI. So artificial general intelligence has become less of a sexy term. And so there was an article from The Verge that talked about this a lot. It talked about how basically all these different companies, Amazon, Sam Altman, OpenAI, Microsoft, they're kind of getting away from this term AGI because I think a lot of people perceive it as threatening. Like this idea of a general intelligence that's smarter than humans feels less marketable than a useful intelligence that increases the agency of humans. So they're all kind of trying to shift their tone and change their messaging around it.
Well, is that also not because AGI and the way that everybody had been talking about it is not realistic.
Well,
I feel
I
like
think it's
I've
a
heard.
slippery. I think that's another piece of it, right? That it's a
Mm.
slippery slope. We talked about this before, right? Where AI tools have the hallmark of consciousness and intelligence 20 years ago was passing this Turing test, and
Right,
the AI
right.
tools that we're using today blew past the Turing test a while back, right?
Yeah.
And so now this
And the
kind of
Turing
goalpost
test
has
for,
shifted.
for anybody listening, the Turing test is just like, imagine you start programming a computer and you're like, how do we know if this thing is ever intelligent? It can do all the math problems, right? You can write up a script and it could do whatever you tell it to do. But when it starts, can it make its own decisions? Can it think in the way that a human thinks? And so Alan Turing, I guess you may call like the grandfather um, of like digital algorithms for computers, comes up with this sort of like theoretical concept that's, if you talk to it, can you convince a human that they're speaking with another human? And if you can do that, then that thing must be intelligent. And if you've used ChatGPT, you know that we blew past that years ago.
Right now we
And so they
have
like
people
redefine. Now it's like, oh, well, that's not good enough. Maybe
to the point of
intelligence.
psychosis and people being delusionally attracted to these AI tools and trying to marry them.
As
So
effective as cult leaders or like the Tinder swindler or something like that, like master
yeah,
manipulator type shit.
yeah, but now the goalpost is moved, and for a lot of people, including me, the prove you're not a robot tests are extraordinarily hard. I mean, I don't know if you've ever struggled with one of these.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely can't prove that I'm a human so easily these days. But yeah, so because that goalpost is moved, the goalpost for an idea like AGI or artificial general intelligence has also moved. You know, like I
Hmm.
think if 20 years ago we dropped Chat GPT on to, we just plopped it in somebody's phone, they would say I have AGI in my phone, and the general consensus would probably agree with them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Um,
so I think that's another part of it. But I also think the idea of something being smarter than us and overtaking what we're doing is not sexy, even if that's actually happening. Like that's maybe what the CEOs of these companies are actually employing, right?
yeah.
Is
Well,
AI
I
that
mean,
can
I think
replace
it's
us.
also important to point out that, you know, is chat so like if we ask this simple question, just like on the surface, is Chat GPT smarter than me? There are probably billions of things that we could ask Chat GPT and it will give us, you and I, a better answer than anything I could possibly come up with. There's probably a super narrow range, honestly, of probably very niche astrophysics, exoplanet related stuff that it just isn't aware of yet, that I could probably answer better than ChatGPT, at least on the surface, just like a kind of your 101 facts.
Right.
So, but that doesn't mean that it's smarter than us, right? Like that's
Right.
not
Because
necessarily the same as AGI. It
Right,
doesn't
because the
know what it's
goalpost is
talking about.
moved. The new goalpost now kind of centers around this idea of a world model, which we talked about a little bit on the show, right?
Mhm.
Like these AI tools developing an understanding of physics in our physical world in the same way that toddlers do when they're developing, like throwing balls and playing with stuff to just understand how the world works. Like
Mhm.
the current generation of AI tools is pushing the forefront of that research right now, and so there's probably gonna like right now it's like, okay, well, you can solve all these math problems and perform all these tasks, but can you do a cartwheel? Because I can. Well, soon a lot of these AI tools will be able to do a cartwheel as well.
But even knowing like all the physics and everything doesn't mean that it's more intelligent than us. Like it doesn't know what it's saying, which is why it'll tell you
Right.
things that are wrong, right? Because it doesn't actually have an understanding. So that's still like a little bit different. Now we may choose to define
Categorically,
that
yeah.
as not being like that's our arbitrary definition, right? That
In
is sort of
reaction to these tools, though, we're now
you're like,
reactionarily
wait a
we're now
second, no.
reactionarily defining intelligence based on what AI
Yeah.
is giving back to us. We're like, oh no, 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 intelligence is not that.
You didn't
This
do
AI can do that.
you
You
don't know what
know?
you're talking about. You're right, but you don't know what you're talking about, which is an interesting thing, right? Because then you'll hear people talk about, well, if you look under the hood and you see what it's doing, or you have people, they've done tests like this before where they have had different models like explain their reasoning as they're doing the thing,
Mhm.
and it's like it doesn't think in a way that a human thinks. I remember one time Claude actually, the team at Anthropic, posted a paper about this, they were asking it math questions and then asking it to go through and explain how it was solving the problems. And it wasn't doing it in any way that I've ever seen anybody do math. It was like, it was literally doing like a predictive thing where it was like guessing certain numbers like randomly at times, and somehow it was getting to the right answer. And that's not, like that's not how I do. You kind of learn to do math in this methodic, step-by-step way that I would describe as logic, as like, the logic of the rules of mathematics. And it was doing something completely different, but it was coming to the right answer. And so it's like, something that thinks but doesn't do it in the way that we do it, does that make it not intelligent? That just sort of makes it like a mysterious intelligence that we don't quite understand.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that we're entering it. I've actually heard some CEOs talk about it this way, and I kind of agree with this take, is that we're entering an era of intelligence abundance, where almost like the same way that computers became more ubiquitous and abundant and cheaper, intelligence is becoming more ubiquitous, abundant, and cheaper, and can be deployed by anyone. Right? I think that's an interesting world to be in.
Everybody, intelligence is everywhere except inside the brains of us.
Yeah, because our cognitive capacity for critical thinking is atrophying, and simultaneously these tools are smarter than all of us, and we're all just on our phone scrolling all the time.
Scrolling, man, being fed by an algorithm that's learning us better and better and better.
Yeah, but it's hard to not imagine a large portion of humanity kind of pushing back against all of this, right? Like we're in this era of, I think, like we've been rage baited, we've been hoodwinked by social media, we've been scammed and finessed by TikTok shoppers, right? Or TikTok ads and shoppers. And it's like, at some point people were like, yo, this ain't even fun. I'm not even having fun anymore. Right? Like, is it really like, are you still getting the same dopamine hit you used to get back in the day, from social media? It's like, and at a certain point, I feel like people are going to be like, all right, it's time to just become, just go off the grid, go off the phones, live a natural life. I think a portion of the population will rock with that, or even like the same way that we talk about digital detoxes or social media cleanses. Like, I feel like it could be even more of a lifestyle thing that's going to be kind of commodified in the future.
That's really interesting. That almost seems like something that only the most privileged people would even be able to partake in.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. It's like, because it is now a sign of privilege to be low tech, which is really interesting.
And like minimalist, you think about people that have those minimalist houses.
Yeah,
almost always they're like super highly affluent folks. Nah, it's a crazy time. I do not know if we're near we could sort of frame this in a similar way to this conversation that we're having about the speculative bubble. You could think of dopamine inflation also playing a role in this, like the dopamine hits that you get from scrolling, where it's like, well, first everybody got online, and then like becoming viral became a thing, and then like YouTube started to take hold, and then all these other websites, and then you sort of have TikTok, which I would say is the latest iteration of like the quickest capture of the shortest amount of
the dopamine bubble is getting bigger,
right? And what happens when that bursts? Does that even burst? Can that burst? Is that if we push this to the limit, is the ultimate version of this us being hooked up into something that is like just constantly? I mean, if you look at the screen time that some people have on their phones, it can get up there in the like teens or 20 hours in a day. It's like most of your day you're spending like looking at a screen.
Have you ever seen Wall-E?
Yeah, Wall-E.
Yeah, I feel like that sounds like a pathway for us, but
yeah, we see like the beginning versions of that, right? Like they're more on screens, they're less active. You see this reflected in the entertainment industry. I just saw a clip of an interview, James Cameron talking about the newest Avatar, which I'm excited to see shortly, or over the next few days probably. And he was saying, it costs a lot of money to make these movies. And he's happy about that because they employ a lot of people who, you know, are making money. They like put their kids in school, whatever, and that he likes that. And that right now, the budgets for this sort of thing on streaming platforms, I mean, it's now a meme, it's a joke about how shit the Netflix movies are. You may have there may be a good documentary. You know, I do think that they're good at producing documentaries. Well, I think that documentaries by and large are not typically very high budget things, right? You kind of need a creative director, you need like a little a production cast, but you don't need to like CGI generate 9-foot aliens that are on a moon orbiting a planet and then like perfectly simulate the physics of water so a sea dragon comes swimming through. And so you sort of like lose this funding potential for these more cinematic, like beautiful theatric portrayals that you would get in something like Avatar. And he was saying that as this continues to be the case, you know, and people are going to the movies less and less and streaming more and more and getting the shit product, I would argue that this is the same thing that we're talking about, right? It's like there's not lots of incentive for a, you know, for a young director to be able to create like this beautiful sort of niche nuanced thing that's going to stand the test of time and become a cult classic. And so James Cameron was saying that he didn't think that, like, now he's fine because, you know, he made it whatever as a director, but if he goes back into time when he made Terminator, which is a highly influential piece of culture, not even just in the cinema universe, not even just in media, but just period, right? It's like relevant to AI now. And he was saying that he didn't think that he would have been able to get a foothold back then if the state of things were what they are now, which I think kind of sucks.
Yeah. I mean, there's a term that we use for this in the creative space, and I think in some tech circles as well. It's called enshittification. This idea of things just becoming increasingly shittier.
Yeah. And that's the natural, because in the same way that like John Blunt back in New England or in England is trying to figure out how to survive till tomorrow, so you do whatever it takes today. And it's like in the media, the version of that is, well, we need to make something cheaply and quickly and put it out there so people can stream it, and then people watch it for like a weekend, and then you got to have like something else loaded up in the chamber, and it takes longer than that to create a good work of art.
Yeah, but I think this then again kind of brings up this idea of a return to more traditional art forms that aren't showcased on screens, right? Like painting or even Broadway musicals are still highly regarded as these like generationally impactful pieces of art that require years of preparation, high skilled performers.
Do you think though? Do you think, I would argue that that's waning? I believe that there's definitely a subset of people that appreciate that at deep levels, but I would say that it's completely sliding away from like the younger generation. The people that watch like streamers, they're not revering Broadway musicals.
That's true, but I think streaming is actually another example of what you're talking about. Like the ones that do this at a high level, I wouldn't underestimate the amount of preparation that they put into it. Literally, it's like a musical theatrical performance or like an improv show. Like these Kai Cenat streams are 4 or 5 hours on end of them just having a whole production, multiple different camera angles, and then somebody at the end is clipping all this stuff and posting it on social media. Like that's a multi-million-dollar production for sure.
I don't disagree with that at all. But I don't think that that's the same as like revering Broadway.
I do think that's a slightly different argument. I would agree with you. But I do think that's an example of a modern art form that is revered by a younger generation that does require levels of skill and prep on par with something like Broadway.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's probably much more that goes into it than you would think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate it. I know I've watched quite a few behind the scenes videos of it, and even you know, like when I lived in New York, I feel like I was seeing a lot of streamers in their different setups, and like they'd have all these different people with them. And I think people don't know how much of a production it is. It also kind of lends itself to this idea of produced authenticity, which I think is an interesting concept that a lot of people are doing these days, are leaning into. You know.
Yeah, I do. That is very interesting. You know, that's the that's the thing about social media these days, is a lot of it is more so about personality, and people like want to see the personality. They want to like feel that authenticity, which you can fake, by the way. Like, we have an idea of what authenticity is, can completely be faked, is all the time, and
Yeah.
there's this, it's interesting, what you put out, the way that you represent yourself in some sense is a mask. It's like, in some sense, it is this thing that you sculpt for people to see a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's
You know,
dangerous. Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
no, I feel like I come back to this question, and I think this is something we talk about a lot because I think both of us are like, I think both of us kind of live equally in this theoretical, imaginative world and in this like pragmatic, what are we gonna do about it type of world.
Yeah.
And it kind of like all this stuff that we talked about, and then even something else that we didn't talk about really that's been on my mind recently is I sent you a couple of videos before about people just constantly bashing AI, like everything AI. Like there's some video that went viral. Some guys like everything AI has ever done is absolutely terrible, and then everyone's like, "Oh my god, I agree with you so much."
It
And
had
I feel
over
like
a
that
million
argument,
likes.
yeah, that argument I think is also flawed because we've been using and benefiting from AI well before. I mean, large language models blew up, right? Like Google Maps and all these different technology. If you try to figure out what you're going to eat every day, like these are all things that you're supported by AI in figuring out
Yeah.
long before LLMs. And I don't think anyone was complaining then.
Well,
But it's
people
like,
didn't
what is it?
know, I think. And that's the problem, is that people don't know shit. People don't know so much. And so you
Yeah.
just come in and you hear like somebody say, okay, AI is stealing from artists, which is true, stealing from everybody who's ever produced anything. And then you
Equal opportunity offender.
and then you see something like people come through and be like, oh, and it's taking 20 billion gallons of water. And you're like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And then you look up how much water goes to watering golf courses, and it's like 5 times as much as what the entirety of AI in the whole world uses. Well, nobody is like, you're not talking, you want to talk about something that's never did anything for humanity, that's never done anything for you? A nice ass golf course. What has that ever
Golf
done for
just caught a
anybody?
stray.
And
Golf
it,
just caught a stray.
and it's like, I don't have nothing against golf, but it's like, it's using factors of water more than all of AI. But it's, people just don't, there's so much information out there. And when you hear something about a big number of gallons of water used by AI,
Yeah.
are you
I
supposed
actually
to be
think
able to go through and cross reference that with every water use? If you do, you'll find out that AI is not using much water at all.
I actually want to push back on that and also fact check that because I'm not sure that we can support that claim fully.
Let's look it up right now.
The
I've
golf,
already done this. I've already done this work, but I'm happy to do it in
because
real time.
I think the problem, and we've actually outlined this before. The problem with trying to quantify the water usage of an AI data center is that so much of that is not required to be disclosed. There is no federal agency that is like, if you're an AI company building a data center, you need to publicly disclose how much water you're using. So all of this all is like, to a degree, guesswork, unless there's new research that supports something else. You know what I mean?
Okay. So this is the United States Golf Association. If they had any bias, it would be to lie and make it seem like they weren't wasting a bunch of money on golf courses. So
Yeah, this is 2003 to 2005 also.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have any reason to think that number would be significantly different. Even if it is, let's just compare it to that. Let's compare it to how much water was used by golf courses in 2005. I think it's fine to compare it to that. It doesn't need to be a number that's used today. So there's 2.8 billion gallons of water per day. 2.8 billion gallons of water per day. So let's just go ahead and do a little math. Let's do this way. 2.8 billion times 365. Okay. So this is 1 trillion and 22 billion gallons of water that gets used for golf courses in 2005.
Wait, that was it was 2.8 billion per day? I didn't even see the per day part.
2.08. So I messed up the decimal there. 2.08 billions of gallons of water per day.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay. That sounds outrageous.
Okay, so 2.08 billion times 365. So that's 759 billion. So this is damn near 800 billion gallons of water per year goes to golf courses. Let's look at how much water is used by AI globally. I think this will be a tough figure. Be a tough figure to find, but it's less. So around 800, comparable.
But then projected to hit 1.7 trillion by 2027.
Okay. So it'll surpass what we use on golf courses in a couple years. And we could do a rigorous fact check of this, but let's assume.
And again,
I bet these figures are all over the place. And I
think it would be very difficult. And this is the point I was making before. I think it's very difficult to rigorously fact check AI's water usage, even domestically in the US.
Yeah.
Specifically because there is no obligation for these companies to report their actual water usage. And it doesn't fare well for them if they do. So
I disagree with that completely, because the water usage is not a problem at all. And all you have to do is compare it to literally anything else. I picked golf courses. That's not even something that people think about. We could compare it to the beef industry. We could compare it to textiles. You could compare it to anything. It's dwarfed by almost every possible industry that you can imagine. And it's comparable perhaps to the water that goes to golf courses. So like, I understand having the caveats, but if you just look into this, if any person that's interested, just look into the water usage in any field that you're curious about, and it totally dwarfs AI to the point that to me, it's not even a cogent point about AI to bring up.
I think the other concern though is the exponential growth in AI water usage over time, right? Like this number was also lower in 2021 than it is in 2025. And it's projected to, 1.7 trillion compared to, like even at the high end, 800 billion. That's a little under 3x over 2 years. And so the idea of this kind of just becoming a runaway effect that becomes a massive usage of our natural resources, it is a concerning prospect, I would say.
I disagree. We're comparing it to a golf course right now. I would just disagree.
Today we are, but in a few years, I could foresee a future in which, the consumption trends of these tools are a little bit more problematic. I think that's also why there's this push for a lot of AI tools to start building infrastructure in space. Because the idea is that, they could probably create something that's less harmful to our environment.
Well, we're mixing ideas.
Right. Energy versus water usage.
Putting data centers in space is not have anything to do with water usage. It still needs to be cooled. And all water is doing is cooling it. And the water, first of all, is being recycled. It's not like it gets destroyed in this process. So I think I agree with you that there are other environmental effects. I disagree that water is one of them. And I disagree mostly with anybody who brings that up as an issue is really having any idea about what the true impacts are, because I think that that's just something that we see in every industry. Every industry is using water and sort of like polluting the environment because as a capitalist nation, we favor industry over other things. But I just the water itself, that for me is like it's just not relevant.
Water itself being used to cool data centers that is also reusable, I don't think is as problematic as people try to portray it to be.
Yeah,
I agree with that take. But I also think, having a technology tool that could theoretically consume an exponentially more larger amount of resources in a very short period of time is like a cause for concern.
100% agree. And so like that's where the argument should be centered around for me.
Yeah.
It's like energy. Okay, yeah. The energy consumption of data centers, that is going to continue to balloon. That's something that we need to be able to contend with. And so you already see some of these companies trying to get ahead on that and thinking about nuclear, right? Environmental effects, thinking about putting it in
Yeah.
space. Like this, like those for me, those are good arguments.
Did you see the RAM supply chokehold?
What's
That's like
that?
a big thing. So RAM, like random access memory in
Mhm.
computers, is also being used. I think it's DDR5 is the most recent generation of RAM that a lot of PC building enthusiasts are into. You know, I'm a PC builder. I know you have one that's custom as well. Um, and the cost of RAM has like shot up substantially. Like it's very hard to get RAM, to the point where I actually posted a video this week of like some Gen Z kids, and they were wearing RAM on their wrist, and they were like playing some kind of rap song and like talking about they got like 100,000 on their wrist. It was pretty funny. But
That is funny.
but yeah, so you know, there's all kinds of new, I'd say, chokeholds on the supply of resources that
Mhm.
that you know the advent of AI is causing. But again, I think I do agree. I'm not one of those people that can jump on a bandwagon of just entirely vilifying a new technology that has helpful ramifications as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's incumbent on us, especially here at Curiosity Theory, to just be critical thinkers in general and
Yeah.
critical of stats that are thrown at us, critical of, you know, critical of institutions that are peddling their messages to
Yeah.
us. I mean, I think that's the power of us being an independent media platform, is that we're not subject to any of those interests, and we can speak freely about, you know, with an informed perspective, ideally, on our take on them.
Yeah. Yeah. With all that being said, somebody may be watching, listening to this right now and be like, damn, uh, Dr. Tyler's sounds bought and paid for by AI. It's not the case. I do think that the direction that we're going is towards a sort of a collapse of like the workforce, in some ways, which I think is horrible. And I think that that is like the impending doom that we as a society, if there is any impending doom, that potential is coming not from AI using water. Like you're talking, not by a long shot. It's that, you know, it's that this thing can do stuff that people do, right? And before long, they're working on the robots like the next is it
The
the
embodied
Nexus?
AI, the
Yeah,
Neo is one of them,
Neo.
but NVIDIA also has Omniverse, which is basically like a gym for robots where they come in, they can do 10 years of, you know, learning how to walk in 2 weeks, and then you can copy and paste that algorithm to other robots, and then they all know
Yeah,
how to walk now, you know.
yeah,
So that
like
stuff is
that's
definitely coming.
yeah,
But just like there have been historical boom and bust cycles economically, there have been cycles previously where you know, like the Industrial Revolution, where all these people had to learn new skills because
mm,
there was just a new market that was created, and so, you know, we had to transition from one type of job to another. Right now, I can see like there's a few job prospects opening up, and a lot of people that aren't skilled enough yet to meet the
yeah,
needs to do those jobs. I think
yeah.
that that's going to evolve in the future as well.
I totally agree with that. That's definitely gonna happen. That always happens. A key thing for me to remember here is that you kind of said it in your statement right there. Learning new skills that people need to when a new industry happens, people need to learn new skills. Well, this new product that is like permeating the culture of the space right now, it can learn maybe better than people, probably not yet, maybe one day. And if you're talking about learning new skills, but you're competing with something that can also learn those skills. It doesn't need to sleep. It, like you said, it could do 10 years in in NVIDIA San Quentin, just locked up in isolation learning physics. Doesn't have to sleep. You don't got to pay it, right? You got to pay the company to use the gym, the real world gym, but you don't, the robot. And then you buy the robots and you employ them, and they're, yeah, maybe they're like embodied, maybe they're working at a warehouse. And it's like, that's so if, you know, if the industry itself produces units that themselves can learn the new skills, then it's like, what are we learning? Or, you know what I mean? What can we learn better than
Management.
programs that are designed to learn?
Management. I think a clever orchestrator, right, could take an AI tool that is an expert at movement and an AI
Mhm.
tool that is an expert at science, and pioneer discoveries in new fields by orchestrating those two to collaborate in new ways. You know what I mean? Um, that sounds like an exciting prospect. One of the courses I just finished, actually, or just created, actually, it'll probably be out by the time we release this, is a course on helping people use AI agents to deploy different workflows.
Uh-huh.
And, it's kind of different from, I don't know if you've messed around with agent mode on ChatGPT
I actually
or
haven't
any of
yet.
the.
No.
Oh, okay. So agent mode is kind of like you ask it to do stuff and it kind of is more proactive and does stuff on your behalf.
Yeah.
AI agent workflows are more like basically designing a series of tasks that are really precise that can be scalable and automated repeatedly. But I could
Mhm.
imagine someone who really gets good at this stuff just having a bunch of different agents for a bunch of things collaborating together. And like that like almost requires a human to understand all of these different moving pieces. You might be able to teach an AI some of that, but I just feel like the flexibility currently, at least, right,
Mhm.
the flexibility of thinking required to do that, I think is best done by a human.
So it's like every human being now is supposed to learn how to manage AI. That's like the only thing. That's like the only thing that people can do is manage a bunch of different AI.
I mean, I would say that that's a similar argument to, every human having to learn how to manage computers and manage software, right? Like I need to
Yeah,
know how to make Slack and Google Chrome and Instagram all work together so that I can successfully create a social media platform. You know what I
sure,
mean?
sure, sure.
So I feel like it's an evolution on
Yeah, yeah.
that logic.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then also it's like that's like one thing that we see emerging now. Surely there will be like other things that that emerge. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But it's like that seems to be a narrow. When you think about learning how to code, what are the potential? If we go back like 2 decades, what are the potential careers that could come from that? Well, it's like anything, any business that you can imagine is going to have a website, right? Any business that you imagine is going to require software that goes with hardware components, whether you're making cars or you're making airplanes or you're creating an online education platform. Like everything needs software. Everything, and but if all the best software developers are AI, then that takes so many, like that takes such a huge swath of
I don't know.
job.
I think it's almost like, all right, allow me to give me some creative liberties here. I'm gonna use like a bit of a chemistry analogy. So it's like
Okay.
if you have, right, like before we had to organize things on the like a coder or a software engineer had to organize atoms on the atomic level, and now that you have an AI that can do software engineering, now you can manipulate the molecules together to form more complex molecules. And so the
That's cool.
idea is you could, yeah, basically now I have an AI tool that's capable of building a great website and an AI tool that's capable of doing frontier science research. And
Mhm.
like how many different creative ways can I mix those together to make something that's never been made before?
Yeah.
Right? I think
Yeah.
I think it doesn't really close off the possibilities. It actually kind of can open them up if you have that mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a really cool analogy too. That first you're like working with the individual atoms, which themselves like stick together in weird ways to make molecules, but then the molecules can interact with it with themselves. And yeah, that's a really cool way. I agree with that. I do agree with that. But with that being said, and we've got an episode coming up at some point in the future
In the past.
we're back,
Probably in the future. Probably in the future. Yeah.
with with Michael, a tech guy,
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we got into this conversation a little bit more. And it's like, it's already true that companies are scaling way back on the number of software engineers. Like, that's already true. It's already true that far less people are being needed. And so, like, even the number of like these sort of AI managerial roles, almost like by definition, is still going to be far less.
I don't
If
know
you
if
go
I
to your
agree with that.
atom and molecule example, there's way more atoms and molecules than there are molecules in any given system, like by definition, because the molecules are made up of atoms. So if people
Right.
were reconfiguring the atoms in the beginning and now they're just reconfiguring the molecules, you've scaled back your number of like the number of agents that you need by orders of magnitude by definition.
Well, I think another counterpoint to that, even though, is that, and this is something we've also kind of alluded to in the other episodes, it could just be the beginning of the end of big corporations. Like, yes, all of these like middle management and entry level roles at these large companies are going away or like not being rehired, but perhaps a lot of that is just newly inefficient as a result of the innovation that's occurred with AI tools. And now a lot of people will be more incentivized to bootstrap hyper efficient, smaller companies where, if we're going back to that analogy, they're kind of putting these molecules together in their own unique way in a very small team. And it's just going to be a lot more small teams.
Yeah, I can see that. That also makes sense to me. That also makes sense to me.
Yeah, but
Um,
all of
yeah,
these though require a massive shift in the way that we kind of think about work, the
yeah,
attitude that we have towards professionalism, like right, like all these this idea of even like dressing appropriately for corporate America, all of these different cultural things that we've taken in have been based on this, I'd say, pre-AI society where we have to assimilate to a large group.
mhm,
But now it seems like a lot of the advantage, and I think we already see a lot of this in the modern workforce. A lot of the advantages have shifted to the people that have carved out something unique for themselves
yeah,
that's interesting. And so you could think about that on like a slightly more macro level, and these small teams like having to carve out niches and be more self-starters. And like there's a lot more opportunities for that if you can carve out the niche.
yeah, yeah. Favoring a different type of temperament, I think, than most people I are developing based on the way that we educate kids, even.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we need to start training people differently to be more curious, to be more to like lean heavily on their own creativity in these spaces and see where the gaps are, as opposed to what traditionally I think is a little bit easier, which is seeing where the like beaten paths are and like
Right.
where you can go. And now it's kind of like, well, now you need to be able to like branch off a little bit and sort of fill in yeah, like you said, carve your own kind of path, which is a
Right.
different, where I think we're biased as entrepreneurial minded self-starters, curious about
Definitely.
venturing into new spaces. That's not I'm not so sure that's a skill that is fostered. I think it's something that everybody has deep in them,
Yeah.
but I don't think, but it's not necessarily something that we tend to foster.
But I think this is where I optimistically believe in humanity's ability to adapt because we've done it before, right? We used to be hunter gatherers. Those skill sets used to be the most valuable skill sets, and then it became like, how do you become a great agriculturalist, right? And then how do you become a great factory worker, right? And so,
Yeah.
time and again, I think we've demonstrated an ability to shift the way that we think about things in the context of basically just surviving and thriving in our environment. I think
I
the success, uh, I
No,
think
no,
the
no.
success
Finish. My bad.
stories, yeah, I think the success stories that are possible in one era are different from the success stories that are possible in another, right? If we were trying to start a science podcast in the agricultural revolution, I don't think And a lot of people would be trying to hear what we're talking about.
Heretics.
Exactly. We might get burned at this, burned on the stake.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
I think we're an example of something that works today that may not have worked in yesteryear.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Where I would push back is the in your narrative, which I like totally understand, and I think you painted in a really sort of accessible and easy to understand way. Where I would push back is thrive. So you say, that we adapt to figure out how to like thrive in
We
this
don't always
environment.
thrive. I agree.
And thriving, I think, I remember I was reading this book one time. I don't remember what the book was. I think it may have been The Third Chimpanzee. If you are into like anthropology and understanding how human society developed from hunter gatherers to modern day, it's a great book. It's by this dude named Jared Diamond, um, anthropologist, actually at UCLA, where I did my PhD. And I emailed him because I liked his books a lot for advice. And like while I was writing my book, and his advice to me was if I wanted to go into academia, not to do any public facing books until
Oh
after
yeah,
I got
yeah.
tenured,
Mm-hmm.
because the faculty that's there, the old, the Vanguard, would see it as me whoring myself out to the
Yeah.
public. But
Right.
anyways, so in his book, he talks, I think it was a third chimpanzee. The idea behind that, right? You think about the name, is that if an alien species were to visit Earth, they most likely would classify, or they could, they could be forgiven for classifying humans as simply another species of chimpanzee, like the bonobos, which is one type of chimpanzee. Then there's like the normal chimp that you're thinking of. They have they're like as closely related to each other as we are to either
Mm-hmm.
one of them, or something like that. And so the idea being that, if you think about put if there were like humans that grew up in cages or in zoos or something, and they didn't have, we didn't get educations growing up, and we were like grunting at one another and our hair was crazy, we wouldn't look that different from, wild chimps, right? Because at the core, like biologically, we're like 98% identical to them. And in this book, he talks about how, the perception of thriving, I think, from a reproductive standpoint, is such that the population balloons. Oh, well, this is a successful species. When humans go from hunting and gathering, where they have to be super creative, super curious about the environment, super physically active, but doing things that make sense for like a primate, which is like, oh, maybe you had to climb a tree to get some apples. Maybe you had to, run for a couple days to chase down a gazelle until it got exhausted. Maybe you found some plants that were like fine to eat, but there weren't a lot of them because there was no agriculture yet. And so you have this, hunters and gatherers probably had this very diverse range of physical activity, very diverse range of just daily sustenance chores. And then somehow people learn how to farm. Maybe they're carrying grains one day and they spill them, and they realize that shit, during the over on this along this path that we walk to get the food from wherever these trees are or whatever, we spilled some seeds, and a few months later trees bloom or sprout up or whatever. And you slowly start to figure out that you can grow stuff. Like you slowly start to figure out you can do agriculture. Well, what you end up doing is finding the crops that are easiest to domesticate. This is like rice, I guess wheat. So what you do is you significantly reduce the amount of diversity in your diet, because you're
Mm-hmm.
selecting only for the things that are easiest to domesticate. And then you become an expert in domesticating that thing in the physical range that humans have as hunter and gatherers is not fully captivated by whatever it takes to just grow wheat. You're doing the same thing over and over. We didn't evolve for. You didn't evolve, like we did not evolve the physical morphology to do wheat production at scale. But because you do that, you have a surplus of calories, which can feed a lot of people. So your population can get larger, even though you're getting like probably a less diverse and less overall healthy diet, and you're focusing on doing this task that your body was not really evolved for. And so it's like you think about people early on in these agricultural civilizations. Yeah, the population's getting huge. There's enough food for people, a lot of people to eat, to grow the population exponentially. But are the people who are farming every day, are they thriving, or is their life worse? They're probably less engaged. They're less curious about the environment. They're more physically strained, and it's not really all that. I just wouldn't, you could question whether or not that's thriving. And I would say that on some level, that's continued to happen. I mean, nowadays, yeah, we have this psychology that is biological, right? It's like hardwired into our minds, and it was hard to survive every day. Every day maybe was like a life and death thing, and we've kind of made things easy enough for us that we're tormented. We have to invent Lexapro and Ritalin, and we have depression and anxiety, and we have all these things that I'm sure that our ancestors dealt with, but the meaning of life at one point was to survive till tomorrow. Nobody has a problem with surviving till tomorrow now. And so we have to like come up with our own meaning. And then maybe religion fills that role for some people, or relationships or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we compete. You've put this one way before. We sort of like constructed an ever sophisticated glass prison maze that is like beautiful and it's amazing, but we sort of like suffer from it because it's so far removed from the experience that I think our like core biology has prepared us for. Sorry for
Yeah.
that.
No,
That monologue.
that sounds like a great sales pitch for getting offline entirely. Join our retreat. We're gonna do a curiosity theory retreat. No phones, no computers. No, man, that's really interesting though. Like, yeah, I mean, but yeah, definitely like it goes to show humanity's ability to continuously adapt to whatever thing has been put in front of us so far. There hasn't been anything. I think there have been deeper existential threats to our survival than AI that we survived.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
If you, if you would have polled me the day that we invented nuclear bombs, like that day, if you would have polled me on that day, I would have been like,
Everybody,
oh, okay,
we're cooked.
this is how humanity ends, and we've
Yeah.
made it this far.
Yeah.
It's still,
So
I guess that's still on the table too. By the way, like we
yeah,
could
yeah,
still
yeah.
go out.
At any time. Yeah, and then there's just more and more things that at any time could kill us all. But
Yeah,
but we're
we've
still
managed.
here.
We're
We're still
managing.
here.
Yeah, so far.
Yeah. And I think on that note, we should let our viewers know, as we always do, that you all got to get out there, keep yourself positive, keep yourself strong, and as always,
Stay
stay
curious.
curious. All right. Peace.
Peace.